This is a story about a comeback from crime, so let's talk about that crime. You tried to smuggle 2 kilograms of cocaine from St. Lucia to Canada, and you got caught, and I'm sure people are wondering, why would you do that?
Trust me, I never thought I'd be in that situation either. I was living in Toronto. I was struggling with substances due to something that was going on in my personal life. And I met someone through my work who was sober, and we became quite close, brought me on a trip. And turns out that trip was not just for vacation, it was also to bring drugs back. I was not very good at it. I didn't want to do it, and there's a lot of other factors involved, but at the end of the day, I did it, and I was arrested.
So you come back to Pearson, I guess it must have been, in Toronto, and you go through customs and immigration, and they say to you, go over there into secondary. What was that like at the moment you realized you'd been caught?
Quite truthfully, I felt a sense of relief, because when I was in St. Lucia, I was in a foreign country. I didn't know that world. I had a great family growing up, and that was just something that was never part of the plan, let's say. And so going from being in a country with St. Lucia, trapped in a world where there's drugs and you have to bring drugs over the border, and then you're arrested, but you're arrested in your home country, you actually feel safe. Like at the end of the day, I want to go home.
Let's fast forward here to where you end up going to prison in Kitchener.
Yes.
What's it like being on the inside?
So in contrary to what is kind of shown in TV and movies, a lot of violence and things like that, where I actually met a lot of really, really nice people. People that, yes, had made mistakes, but also had tremendous, difficulties in growing up and tremendous suffering growing up. And so we kind of became quite close due to all the different things that we went through. Definitely was a prison. It wasn't easy. There was a lot of rules that didn't make sense. There was a lot of abuse by, whether it's verbal or mental, emotional by staff. It was definitely very challenging at times, but I think the fact that we all became friends, at least some of us, became a community.
Somehow, in prison, you come up with this business idea. And I know you've told the story lots of times before, but how did that come about? Like flavored popcorn, that this idea comes to you while you're incarcerated.
Popcorn wasn't the first idea. Like the first idea was purpose and proving other people wrong that once incarcerated that your life is over, that you're not worthy of redemption. And I recognized from the get-go that I had made a mistake, that I had a lot of reparations to do with my family, myself, and the community. And when I got there, I met so many other people in there that just realized that, but we faced this enormous barrier of society and just being condemned even after you're done your time when it comes to finding a job. And in prison, there wasn't much to do, but we were able to cook a lot of our own food because I was in a medium security facility, and we would bond over these meals, birthdays, Super Bowl, Canada Day, things like that. Mm-hmm. And it just happened to be Super Bowl where we were making a bunch of different snacks and talking about work and employment. But I realized that I wanted to do something, make something good out of this experience. And I knew that it wasn't going to be easy. I knew it wasn't going to be well liked by some people, right? Mm-hmm. But it was the only way that we could kind of get out there and prove it. And so Comeback Snacks, Popcorn, was born inside prison with the idea of hiring the formerly incarcerated to fight against the stigma against employment, right?
So that notion gets you through your time behind bars, mm-hmm. But when you get out, it would have been very easy to move on to other things or to treat the popcorn making as a hobby. How did you keep sustaining it as a business idea?
So when I got out of prison, I actually had to spend more time in a halfway house. So in Canada, the system is not like, oh, you're out of prison, your time is done. It's not true. I had a 4-year sentence and I served every single day of that, just in different formats. And so the excitement and the motivation from knowing that I was building something that was going to matter to myself and to other people and to society, because they would actually see that people after incarceration are worthy of employment, it was like I couldn't do anything else.
One of the things that strikes me is they're stocking these shelves right now, so it's not totally full.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, well, we just landed here in the store, yeah. But that's how we try to separate ourselves, is from like the bold flavors.
Yeah.
So salted chocolate and caramel. Have you heard of that before?
I have not.
Probably not.
Did you invent it?
I didn't invent it, but I know people like it, so I put on caramel corn.
And the tagline, popcorn so good it's criminal?
Made with conviction.
So, the story, the unique story, obviously is interesting, and presumably will catch the eye of at least some consumers. How authentic is it? In other words, what are you actually doing to help people who have been incarcerated?
So that's a great question. And so initially it was like, yes, let's hire people directly. But as you're a small company, you realize you can't hire all the people that you want to. So that's hiring directly by offering employment. And then as we grew, we had to find a manufacturing partner. Okay, so now that we have a manufacturing partner, how do we still hire people? So as we were getting into more stores, we were able to hire people to help do demos. And then we realized, okay, there's a lot of people that are reaching out to us from all across the country. So what do we do now? So what I decided to do was open up my calendar and my schedule to offering people advice on how I got to where I was. And so I'll work with people one-on-one all the time. And we also partner with a number of organizations all across Canada and even some in the US in a variety of different ways where I will offer workshops to their clients, which are the formerly incarcerated. So that's how we've been scaling it. And what I have on the docket for this year is actually building a course for those coming out of prison or that have been out of prison on how to make their own comeback. So, and that's going to be available online and in person.
What about somebody right now who is in prison, who might be watching this on television? I assume that it can feel very bleak for people while they're incarcerated, and then they see your story and they maybe think, that's a little too much for me, like I'm not going to be able to start my own company. But what message do you have for them?
The message that I have for anyone that is going through the justice system right now is think about what you've been through, but take accountability, responsibility, and immerse that into your story that you're going to tell. Because even if you're trying to get a job at an employer, honesty is always the best way to go. And my first job out of prison was not comeback snacks. My first job out of prison was actually at a gym. And what I did was I wrote a cover letter. I said, I've been in prison and I live at a halfway house down the street and I'm trying to make a comeback. And I had my prison resume, which was all the jobs that I did in prisons, addressing the whole gaps in the resume thing when it comes to finding a job.
What did you do for that period of time? Yes.
And I put all my prison jobs down. So it's a way of not reframing your story, but talking about it in a way where you're accepting responsibility. It's about telling your story in a way that demonstrates that you've accepted responsibility, but also that you're willing to learn and that you're honest. And I think that's really what an employer wants.
What about on the other side of the table for that potential employer who doesn't know anyone who's ever been to prison and is thinking, why would I hire somebody who's been through that when I could easily hire someone who hasn't? Why pick somebody who would make bad decisions in their life and committed crimes?
So this actually ties in really well to a report that one of our community partners, the John Howard Society, put out a couple months ago. And they did a study of a bunch of employers who had hired people with criminal backgrounds and without. And they actually found that the individuals with criminal backgrounds had performed just as well, or if not better. And so you have to assess each situation on its own, but that's because people that have been to prison, they are fighting so hard just for that second chance, and they're not taking things for granted. And so when someone gives them that chance, and they can be themselves, and they can, talk about where they've been and not pretend to be someone else, that's a really, I think, freeing and empowering feeling. So.
You have so much energy, so much enthusiasm, and obviously a key part of your story is your own time in prison, and you're very open about it. Do you ever get tired of telling that story? Do you ever wish that you could just be an entrepreneur without that extra baggage to talk about?
I don't think it's extra baggage. It's the bags that I choose to carry, and it makes you strong. It's like lifting weights or going to the gym. You got to keep lifting, and I don't get tired because I meet so many different people every day that have so many different stories. Because obviously my story is not everyone's story, and I realized that I was lucky and that I had a great family, and there are so many other stories that need to be told and voices that need to be heard. So just going out and hearing these stories and helping those individuals amplify their voice, that's true freedom.